Prior to the explosion of psychotherapy, people were governed by shoulds. But beginning in the 1960s, the therapeutic model replaced the moral model as the guide to one's behavior.
That's because when you use should statements, you then moralize all behavior, including things that aren't moral. For example, you should do the dishes. If you don't do the dishes, now you feel more guilty. Now you feel more and more like you have failed something, like you've done a moral wrong because you should have done the dishes. So when you don't, it feels worse than I would like to do the dishes. I could do the dishes even. So I'm not sure what direction he's taking this, but replacing these should statements, to a certain extent of course, seems to be nothing but beneficial because it is. So anyway, this PragerU video came up. It's titled, "Your Parents Don't Deserve This." Sounds kind of harsh right off the bat, I'm not gonna lie. What do the parents not deserve? Do they not deserve you? They don't deserve the curse that you have brought upon them. It's hosted by Dennis Prager too, so this ought to be interesting.
There is a pandemic in the Western world, especially, but not only in America, that few are talking about, let alone addressing. This pandemic doesn't actually kill people, but it does ruin lives, crush families, and cause debilitating pain. Far more than most.
PragerU? You're the pandemic? PragerU? You really self-aware for your video, but okay.
Cases of COVID-19. What pandemic am I talking about? The pandemic of people who do not speak to one or both of their parents. Why have these people decided to hurt their parents in one of the worst ways possible? To the extent of not even allowing their parents contact with their grandchildren? There are three primary reasons. The first is the rise of the therapeutic mentality.
Are we going to get any sources on this even? Is there a rise of people not talking to their parents or something? With roughly 10% of Americans estranged from parent or child, you very likely know someone in your life with parental problems. Well, I mean, 10% of Americans? Is there like a massive rise in this? 1/4 of adult children estranged from a parent. It doesn't sound like a very massive rise. Okay, well, apparently there's something there. I don't know why they couldn't just give us a source.
Prior to the explosion of psychotherapy, people were governed by shoulds. But beginning in the 1960s, the therapeutic model replaced the moral model as the guide to one's behavior.
That's because when you use should statements, you then moralize all behavior, including things that aren't moral. For example, you should do the dishes. If you don't do the dishes, now you feel more guilty. Now you feel more and more like you have failed something, like you've done a moral wrong because you should have done the dishes. So when you don't, it feels worse than I would like to do the dishes. I could do the dishes even. So I'm not sure what direction he's taking this, but replacing these should statements, to a certain extent of course, seems to be nothing but beneficial because it is. What you do then is you moralize everything when you use should statements, and you make it harder and harder to actually get things done, because then every time you don't succeed in getting something done, you feel like you have morally failed. So how is therapy the fault of kids not wanting to talk to their parents? Maybe because of therapy, they're realizing how fucked up their parents were? How much their parents mistreated them, maybe?
Popular phrase at the time was, "There are no shoulds." I'll use a family story to illustrate this point.
Oh, great.
Despite the fact that his mother was a very difficult woman, my father called her every night. And every night, she would yell at him. As a child, I heard this because instead of holding the phone to his ear, my father would periodically place the phone on the kitchen table. Had my father been born a generation later and told a therapist how much he dreaded calling his mother?
Why are you hearing your dad getting yelled at by his mom all day? This is like suddenly just got really traumatic. I remember as a wee little lad playing jump rope with my friends and eating milk and cookies, and then every night I would listen to My grandma literally blow her lungs out, screaming at my father about what a piece of shit he was, how much I am a mistake, and how much she wishes I had been aborted or at least put up for adoption. Now, why am I telling you these things? Holy shit, dude. Chill.
The therapist would likely have led my father to believe there was no reason he should talk to her.
What?
The therapist would have declared my grandmother toxic and given my father permission to avoid calling her.
Well, it would depend. If you're experiencing a bunch of psychological distress simply because you need to call somebody who it sounds like is toxic, what is the reason that you should call her? That's the first question. Now again, if we go my route, I would like to call my mother, then that's fine. That doesn't moralize this thing. That doesn't add a layer of guilt to the equation here. So I would like to do this thing. Okay, fine. Why should you actually do this thing? Why should you use your mental resources to get yelled at every night on the phone just on virtue of the fact that this woman is your mother? I don't know where he's going with this, but what the hell is up with the therapists are going to just say, just stop talking to them? They might give you an approach on how to continue to have a relationship with this person, but also how to not extend yourself so much so. This is weird. We're literally back to the conservative hating on therapy crap.
A culture that declared there are no shoulds would have concurred. But my father lived in the age of shoulds. Moreover, he was a religious Jew who had been taught the 10 Commandments since childhood, the fifth of which is, honor your father and your mother.
Oh no. What about the parts of the Bible about how fathers should not be provoking their children to anger? What? This is what I mean, by the way. This is the problem with his mindset is, so why should I endure this thing? Why should I, as an adult who's already stressed to the max, need to deal with more stress because I got to call somebody who's going to yell at me? Why? 'Cause the Bible. Once again, we're back to, well, 'cause my Bible. My ancient 10 Commandments on some rocks said so, bruh. I'm not going to just blindly honor someone else just because they are my parent or just because they are related to me in some way or another.
And he believed, as did most Americans, that the 10 Commandments were given by God. In our secular age, the 10 Commandments are largely ignored. In fact, there are no God-given commandments.
And yet we still have rules against murdering and stealing now, don't we, Dennis?
Instead, you do what you feel is right. If you don't feel like talking to your mother or father, you don't.
No, by the way, it's not like that. It's not just if you don't feel like it. It's why do you not feel like it? That's the first question to ask. Man, this lacks so much nuance. This is painful. Your parents don't deserve this? Man, your parents didn't deserve you, Dennis. There's no way they were that terrible people.
Father, governed by the 10 Commandments and many other shoulds, called his mother every night despite the fact that he rarely felt like doing so. A second reason for this pandemic is
This is such a... Okay, 'cause the Bible? Like, what's the reason why? Why should I go through more stress just 'cause the Bible says so now? Man, this is desperate.
A second reason for this pandemic is parental alienation. This is usually caused by one parent against the other during or after a divorce, frequently, though certainly not always, by the mother against the father. She is so angry at her ex-husband that she has decided to hurt him in one of the worst possible ways.
Oh, see, I thought this was going the direction that one parent was secretly going to be an alien. We were going to have a little X-Files plot twist coming up, but no. Instead, we have to go this route. Obviously, anybody who is using the children as a tool against an ex-partner is fucked up in the head. They have serious issues, okay? I'm not sure where he's going to go with this, though.
By convincing one or more of their children that their father is a terrible human being, unworthy of their love, respect, or even time. The children should have nothing to do with him.
Dennis is like, and that unfortunately is what happened to me. I don't even know. Okay. Yeah. Parental alienation. That would definitely be a problem. I don't know how frequent that really occurs though.
Pandemic is ideological. This is the newest excuse for cutting ties with parents. I suspect few people...
Here we go. Here's going to be the real meat of the video right here, guys. It's because of the woke. The woke liberals. don't even want to be around people like me. Simply people who don't believe that trans people are human. Why can't we all get along? What happened to civility in this land of the free?
Previous generations encountered parents whose children didn't speak to them because of how the parent voted.
You sound so bad.
Many Americans hated Richard Nixon, but it's hard to imagine grown men and women in the late 1960s or early 1970s who refused to speak to their parents because the parents voted for Nixon.
I would love
But
to
many
see how
parents
often,
who voted for Donald Trump
I would love to see how often this is happening, apparently. That literally it's just, my dad voted differently. Goodbye, father. Long live the king. The minute they vote differently, usually it's coupled with the parent voting a certain way and then going off the fucking rocker and then becoming crazy and then literally becoming QAnon conspiracy or something like that.
have a child who does not speak to them. For the record, I am not speaking about myself. My 2 sons and 2 stepsons and I speak frequently, love one another, and share values. But I know how lucky I am. I have met a lot of good people who have at least one child who no longer speaks to them. Yes, there are times when a parent is so abusive, pathological, or evil that communication becomes essentially impossible. And it is important to note,
Wow, so how are your sons still on such good ties with you then, Dennis? Got him.
you do not have to love your parents. Just talk to them. Even the Bible, which commands people to love their neighbor, to love the stranger, and to love God, never commands us to love our parents. But at the very least, we owe them this, not to inflict terrible pain on them.
What if they're inflicting terrible pain on you? Like every time you call just to say hi, they're screaming at you.
Action of such pain on a parent is about as great an act of cruelty as most people will ever inflict on another human being.
And this is why I should at least have my kids for the weekend.
If there is a God who gave the 10 Commandments, these people will be judged accordingly. I'm Dennis Prager.
Why does it always have to end with a creepy threat? Why is it always, these people will be judged accordingly? I'm Dennis Prager. Thanks for tuning in. Like, whoa, dude, chill. I also like how it's like, honor your father and mother. So you need to talk to them even if you don't want to. But the Bible never says you have to love them. The Bible says you can burn with seething contempt every time you talk to your parents. The Bible never says anything else, anything differently. I seethe for contempt for every single human I encounter. Except for the people that the Bible says to love, of course. So hey, man, you can hate your parents for all I care. Just talk to them. Just call them up and let them know, Dad, Mom, I hate you. Remind them of your feelings for them. Do not isolate them. Like, it just seems so wishy-washy that it's you don't have to love them. Just talk to them. Like, okay, all right, cool. This was a pretty boring video, not gonna lie. A little bit underwhelming, but still, what the hell? I just love watching PragerU. I just love watching all the insanity that comes out of this channel.